Hey now, it's the Mike and JD show, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert. And I'm joined as always by JD by God Oliva. How you doing, JD?
Ask me again in a half hour. I'm actually pretty good tonight. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Part of being a teacher is sometimes you have to bring your own stuff, and sometimes you forget that stuff at work. I forgot the plug for my computer, so I'm quickly troubleshooting a solution as we do the show, but here goes nothing.
Yeah. So, guys, if you're, we're gonna get right to it, but before we get into the show, if you're here for Brace for Impact, that is coming. But we had a hot story that we wanted to get into, and we wanted to bring on like a legit journalist. Like when me and JD are talking, we're just a couple of dipshits. We don't.
Dorks.
I've never taken a journalism class, right? I do have a degree, but it's in safety. So like I'm not really like an authority on the pro wrestling media or anything like that, but we have this big story with CM Punk coming out, and I wanted to bring in a legit journalist, BJ Bethel. He currently works for SE Scoops. He's done actual sports media. He worked with the Church for a long time. Used to host a podcast with the legendary Bruce Mitchell. BJ Bethel, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing good. I just I remember some life lessons, and one of them is never post on Instagram when you're angry.
yeah.
If someone will find it.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it, man. So a little bit of a backstory. I actually did. I do PowerPoints in this now, BJ. I'm learning. I tried to do a little bit of PowerPoint.
Great.
Yeah. So last week, Dax Harwood was on his show basically saying that he's had conversations with CM Punk recently, and saying that he hopes that CM Punk was reading Kern's book, and that he misses wrestling. Punk then replied to that story saying that there was a great story about Gator and Coco fighting in the locker room, and then Lawler drags him in the office the next day and they squash it. Fascinating, right? And then next thing you know, Dave Meltzer takes to the F4W message board, which is a fucking cesspool, and says, and they're talking about the situation, and Dave says, do you know why they didn't advertise Punk versus Moxley longer and why it had a short build? Because Punk agreed to it, and then AEW got a legal letter saying he wasn't down with it and wasn't doing it, and they didn't know if he'd come until Tony put his foot down. There are a lot of nice things I could say about him, and you could absolutely argue his position on Moxley was correct, but you can't argue he willingly did what he was asked in that scenario. And then Punk angrily on Instagram. I can't actually read that, so I'm going to pull it up on my phone. But Punk then takes to Instagram and says, "Sigh, I wasn't cleared to come back to wrestle yet. Then the plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view. I sat and listened to Moxley's Rocky 3 idea. I explained how I'd never seen a Rocky movie, which that should have raised an alarm right there. They should have been fired on the spot. Never saw Rocky. So the Rocky 3 idea, meaning Clubber Lang earlier in Rocky 3 beats Rocky Balboa very quickly, and then Rocky works his way back up to a title shot. That's what they're saying. So, and then I thought the idea sucked, but if the boss wanted it, do it, whatever. He said he wouldn't lose to me. I'd never experienced someone refusing to lose to me. I just laughed. I asked Tony if this was what he wanted, and he said yes. He's the boss, so I said okay, but I need to be cleared first. They just kept saying it could just be a squash, so I didn't need to be cleared. I scoffed at that. My health is more important. Dave Meltzer is a liar. Jericho is a liar and a stooge. There were plans, but plans always change, but I'll never put any company above my health ever again. That's a lot to unpack. So, BJ, we'll go ahead and start with you. What do you make of this whole situation?
He's lying. He saw Rocky 3.
If you look at he's actually maintained that he has never seen the Rocky movies for well over a decade. And if this is a story, if this is a work, so to say, he has stuck to this work longer than the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah.
Oh, you're really going.
I'm having fun.
I mean, I think the guy loves Slapshot, but he's never seen the Rocky movies, and he's into fighting and boxing, and it's kind of like, I kind of doubt that. I mean, the thing is he posted that, and then it was almost immediately deleted.
Yeah.
And except for a few people catching it, nobody knew what in the hell he was talking about, because people need to remember that was the Wrestling Observer forum where Meltzer put that post up is a premium forum. You have to subscribe to the Observer to have access to it. So for somebody who says he never reads any of the dirt sheets, or which I hate that name, or any of the websites, or any of the newsletters, any of those things, that really begs some questioning as to why he was even paying attention to it. And if he doesn't read this stuff, why does he care about it so much? I mean, he really, he used this term, he seemed, for somebody who hates the carny aspect of the business, he sure uses a lot of the wordage. And, he calls Jericho a stooge. He accused Adam Page of stepping on his blank during the whole press conference from hell. And he, but it's like it's to me, it's like he's stepping on his own thing, and not only doing that, he's tripping and falling down the steps and landing head over heels. It's like, is this guy going to stop self-destructing anytime soon? I mean, I just don't think it's going to happen.
No.
To be fair,
ahead, JD.
As far, I don't know if you're familiar with the Fight Game Media Discord, but stuff gets posted in there and then gets shared to people who are not members of it because of screenshots pretty frequently. So I'm going to assume, it's possible that Punk is a longtime subscriber to the Observer and frequents the hellhole known as the board. It's also possible someone screenshotted it and sent it to him.
Well, that's exactly what happened. So when I read it, it was because somebody sent it to me because it got on Reddit, and then it got shared on Twitter, and then it got shared on Instagram. And so that's likely where.
That's a very fair point.
That's likely where all this is coming from. So I guess the question, and JD, I'll ask this to you, and then I want to get BJ's thoughts on this. So last week we were pretty bullish that CM Punk was coming back. What say you now? How is this whole situation looking now, man?
I was bullish 24 hours ago. I had this wild conspiracy theory about the truck that I was ready to go off on. I don't know. I mean, at the same time, no one's shot anything down, right, in a long time. I was going to flow this thing about the truck, right? Rather than covering Punk's face with the truck, wouldn't it have been easier to move the goddamn truck before shooting it? Right? Yeah. Like, you don't have to have a degree in filmmaking, which I do, to move a truck to know it's the easiest way not to shoot it unless you're trying to create conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So I was the conspiracy theory because I think they did that on purpose, covering it so people would say, oh, that's the trunk with CM Punk, which maybe that was the plan. But as one says about stepping on their own dick, I don't know at this point. I don't know. I don't know where it stands. I really don't.
What do you think, BJ?
What I do know is that even up before he made this Instagram post, he would have to make a massive public apology before anything were to go in any further direction. This isn't a situation like Coco Beware and Steve Keirn getting a fight. And, I love the fact he loves Steve Keirn. I'm a huge Steve Keirn fan. I think he's one of the most great. I think he's one of the most influential wrestlers that ever lived. And, and I think it's a great story, and it's, maybe that's how they should have handled it instead of brawling and, punching Nick Jackson in the face. But, we're storming into the guy's locker room. I don't know. But, we're not really storming. I don't know. The story doesn't look good for Punk has come out of the press conference. But anyway, the thing I don't get is that the thing is that he was having an uphill battle anyway with that locker room to get back. As of right now, the only people who want him back in that company are Dax and Cash, FTR, his two buddies, and Hart cosplayers. And no one else wants him there. 3 weeks ago, Britt Baker, who Punk put over massively, called her the real fourth pillar of AEW, who he's never said anything negative about, flat. I mean, just tore him to shreds in a podcast interview, saying that, it was like watching somebody burn. They were on this awesome high. They had a great pay-per-view. It had a lot of buys. Then he goes, you watch this press conference and you see it all burning down. That was her words. I mean, that's how that locker room feels. They do not want him back. I'm sure he's crossed with Moxley because Moxley's one of those guys. He's not vocal about it, but he had to come back. He had to skip a vacation to come back and do the title reign when he got hurt. He had to come back, and he made the big speech on Dynamite after the whole controversy. And he's one of the guys that stepped up in the locker room afterwards. He's not happy with Punk. You know, neither is Danielson. A lot of those guys say they're never going to work with him again. I'm not even talking about the elite right now, who are executive vice presidents of the company as of now. You know, they're under contract and their deals are coming up at some point, but that's going to change. But still, it's like you're not even talking about the guys he's had main issues with, like Adam Page and Omega and the fight, the guys involved in the fight, like the Young Bucks. I mean, but just the general locker room doesn't like him. They don't want him near the company. And that is his biggest problem. And what he did with that Instagram post was just tear apart any step forward he could possibly make, where he could say, look, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for what I did to you guys that have been here for 3 or 4 years. I should have thought better of it. I should have addressed these guys myself. I shouldn't have done it after the pay-per-view. I shouldn't have done it next to the owner of the company. And I mean, in just one Instagram post, he blows all that up. I mean, I cannot see him coming back in that locker room.
Yeah, you know, and I've said this before, but the biggest problem with CM Punk is everywhere he goes, he takes himself with him. And he had, you know, he's had these issues everywhere. He's probably the biggest star in AEW, and he just can't seem to get out of his own way. And it's disappointing because I'll be honest, I'm a huge fan of the guy. I really am. His return to the United Center is one of my favorite moments in wrestling history. I know JD was in the audience. I was just watching, like, one of 5 rampages I ever watched was that episode. So I love the guy. I wish he could just, you know, cut the shit and get back to work. So I do know that you know, the elite are not interested in working with him at all, and lawyers are involved in that whole situation. They want nothing to do with the guy. So, you know, BJ, you know, what if you're Tony Khan? Put yourself in Tony Khan's shoes. You know, you got this guy who was a money draw for you. Now, there was some diminishing returns, like it didn't sustain. Like, there was this big peak, and then, of course, you're going to flatten out a little bit. But I would say that after he's been there, like before he got there, the average pay-per-view buy was like around 100,000. He comes in, they do over 200,000. Now they're back around 130, 140. I would say he's a big part of the reason why that has actually sustained, because he brought in so many new viewers. You know, if you're Tony Khan, how do you handle the situation? Do you just cut bait with the guy? Be like, look, this guy just doesn't get it. And if I bring him back, it's going to cause more havoc than it's worth. Or do you go like, you know, hey, look, money is very important to me. I'm a billionaire. My dad's a billionaire. He would like some more money. I think we can make more money with this guy. What do you think?
I mean, I think they should try to probably make something work out, because they have a TV deal that's coming up, and this next TV deal will determine the long-term lifespan of this company. You know, their deal with TNT and TBS is up in 2024. We have a vastly changing landscape, both in media and pro wrestling. We don't know what's happening with WWE right now. Right now, the steadiest game right now in town is AEW. You know, WWE is ran by a guy who's an admitted sex creep, you know, judging by how he, you know, how he spends his money on paying people off. So how, you know, you got to look at your locker room and you got to say, okay, is it worth possibly losing Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and maybe a few other guys like Chris Jericho, who built your company and made the conditions possible for it to exist, to bring in Punk back? Or do we just say, you know, we're not going to do anything with this guy. We're going to have him, we're going to cut him out. I think maybe you make some inroads. You try to get some people to talk, but I don't still think Punk's in any, I don't think he even knows. I don't think he understands what damage he did. I honestly don't. And that's one thing I've talked to fans of his even that don't even understand. It's like they don't understand why he doesn't seem to see the reality of the own situation he created.
Gotcha. JD, what do you say?
It's hard for me to argue any of that. And again, I am a huge CM Punk fan. He's still probably my favorite wrestler, but it's hard. Like I said, I feel different than I felt 24 hours ago. 24 hours where I really, you know, again, time and money tend to heal all wounds, especially in pro wrestling. But then, like, you kind of double and triple down. And I don't think this is a you know, Brian Pillman fourth dimensional chess deal where you're working the marks on the internet. I just don't see that. I just don't see what the return is. I mean, like, and again, he deleted it, but again, when you're famous, you know, that's the problem with Instagram stories is like, theoretically they only last for so long, but I mean, like, people screenshot this stuff all the time.
I do it to Raj Giri like regularly.
Well, he deserves it. That's different. I don't know, man. It's like, it's just disappointing.
He should be glad there wasn't Instagram in 2004.
Yeah.
We should all be glad there wasn't Instagram in 2004, quite frankly. I don't know. I really want them to figure this out just because I think it would make for compelling TV. Like as a viewer and a fan of the promotion, this could be a big thing if everybody could put the egos aside. And Oliver's brought up a good point. It's like back in the day where like this would draw money and they would all make more money. They're basically salaried employees. So it's not like their end game is going to change. It would make AEW a lot of money. It could make the Turner Network some more money.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I said, at the end of the day, it bums me out as a fan.
It does. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's just that, you know, the fans are disappointed, and you got to be disappointed if you're a wrestler. I mean, the business got shaped into the image he wanted. I mean, that's why he came back and he's a white meat baby face. He's not the guy he used to be, where he was talking about these smaller companies and things like that, and bringing some reality into the WWE TV and things, you know, things of that nature. And that's really, to me, like, it's like the business got shaped in his fashion and he just can't really get out of his own way. It's almost a tragic story. I mean, it really is. He comes off this amazing year and then he just self-destructs, and it's, you know, and he almost takes this, everything that was built afterward, you know, that some of it laid by him, most of it, you know, by other people, but, you know, a lot of them were inspired by him. And it's kind of a tragedy at this point. I'd like to see it have a happy ending. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe it will be. Who knows?
Well,
wrestling.
It's just so funny because the talk of Brody's been coming up so much now, trying to carry himself like Brody. And, you know, this is how Bruiser Brody would handle it. Bruiser Brody died. He was murdered by a promoter and by a booker in the shower. Is this really like, and again, one of my favorite wrestlers, but I mean, like, is that really what we should be like saying? You know, should we be having WWBD bands around our wrists right now? What would Brody do? That's a 2004 joke. Like, I don't know, man. This sucks.
It does. I mean, it is. The thing I get is that he brings up situations like he's talking about Moxley in the same words that, you know, Moxley was going to lose to me. He already lost to you like 3 times. You know, and to set this angle up. I mean, the thing was as stupid as if you read his part of the story from the Instagram thing and you look how that match set up the pay-per-view, it puts over Punk as this god. He recovered from a horrific foot injury in 2 weeks to beat Moxley for the title. You know, it's stupid the way he looked at that.
I don't know. I think he had a point. I think it did, because we talked in our Discord and some people agreed that it did lower interest in the pay-per-view, seeing the squash. I understood it at the time and I defended it at the time, but you look at those numbers and the feud was cold going in, and some people do attribute that to the match. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I think it's as valid an argument as any, but I get it. It's like when you're Tony Khan, you're trying to massage all these egos at one time. Like Moxley's like, why am I an interim champion? Tony's like, well, that's what Dana would do, you know? And I get it from all aspects, and I get Moxley's thing, but clearly Punk wasn't on board. But I was there that night, man. Punk was still over. It was huge. It was huge when he won. And MJF winning the title, everybody saw what was coming, and then it was done. And then, like, man, I remember listening to that podcast, that press conference driving home. I was just like, is this real? Is this really happening right now? Like, it's just disappointing.
I remember I watched the pay-per-view and I remember listening to the press conference because he was the first one that spoke, I think. Yeah. And he was a mess. You could tell he was really hurt. And I probably played a part in some of the things he said, but I was texting friends of mine. I was like, if you're not out of the building, get the hell out. It's like, it's going to be bad. And then the next day you start hearing about, oh, there was this fight, there was this. And it's just, you know, it's just been self-destructive, and that's the saddest part, is that he's writing his own story this way. You know, he had a choice. He walked away. He became kind of a folk hero. And when he came back, he had this folk hero like following. I mean, he was bigger than anything in the business. You know, he represented something bigger, and he comes back, and it's just been like his tragic fall. Just this guy who, you know, I mean, the craziest thing about, you know, his problems is he's blaming people for him that weren't even involved, you know. Yeah, I mean, I think you can talk about, you know, the build of the Moxley match. Maybe the squash thing wasn't a good idea. And, you know, but at the time, it's like Moxley was, I mean, it was just like he was being set up to lose to him again. He needed to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, because, you know, I mean, Moxley's been the company guy. I mean, Moxley's lost 15, 16 matches since he's been there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also made some careers. Wheeler Yuta, Teshida, you know, a lot of guys who he's elevated.
MJF.
MJF. You know, he put over MJF, who frankly, I don't think deserved it. I think he's a crap champion. But, you know, I mean, nobody else will agree with that. But, you know, to me, I'm like, you know, I don't think he's one of the top 5 guys in that company and shouldn't be holding the belt. But it's like but at the same time, it's like he put him over. He did what he's supposed to do. Okay, who did Punk lose to? He lost once to MJF. He lost once to Mox in a squash that was set up to make him look even better going into a pay-per-view.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I disagree with him. I thought the Rocky 3 thing was awesome. So, yeah, I like the Rocky 3 thing. So,
I mean, I think it was for a company those stories.
Covering those stories. Yeah, they sure told. I don't know if it was executed well. I think it looked good on paper. I don't know if the execution came off.
Well, I think it was. Well, I think the execution was off because the squash match was like 2 weeks before the actual pay-per-view match, so there wasn't really enough time for him to rebuild himself to get. So that was my biggest criticism of it. But the idea in theory, I thought was awesome. But I'm also a Rocky movie freak. One of the first columns I ever wrote was me ranking the Rocky movies based on voting. I built an Excel sheet. I did this whole thing. So like, yeah, I obviously I saw that one coming from a mile away. I loved it. So.